Welcome to the Enduring Minds podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I am your host, Jason Bahamundi. Enduring Minds is where we explore the intersection of mental health and endurance sports while breaking the silence and stigma surrounding men's mental health. We're here to have real, open, honest, and vulnerable conversations, sharing the struggles and everything in between the struggles and victories that shape who we are. So leave the shame, guilt, and fear at the door and join us for another episode of Enduring Minds. This show is part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, and you can find it on the Run Try Bike YouTube channel and your favorite podcast platform under the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. This is our 7th episode of Enduring Minds, and we're glad that you joined us. Check out our other shows wherever you get your favorite podcasts, as there are 8 available to you, and they have incredible stories, and there is something there for everyone. So now let me bring forward my co-host, Evan Birch, onto this show. Hey, Evan, how are you doing today, buddy?
Good, Jason. Good. I'm glad to be back. I know I missed the last one, but I'm excited to be back and having a conversation with our guest today. So I'm looking forward to it. I mean, we're creating these safe spaces and these open spaces for men and women and anybody who wants to listen to us have these conversations, which is great. So I'm happy to be here again and looking forward to our chat today.
So I'm glad you mentioned women, because after the last episode with Shannon Booker, I got 2 or 3 emails, and they were all from women who were able to relate to Shannon. So while we talk about and bring on men onto our show and the men's mental health aspect of the conversation is obviously impacting more than just men. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So let's get into today's show. We're excited to be joined by Tom Smoot. I met Tom through Threads when I was looking for guests for our Fiery Ember show, and he was kind enough to say yes. Our conversations since then have centered around men's mental health, and he was one of the first people I thought of when we decided that we wanted to bring guests onto the Enduring Minds podcast. Tom is a biochemical engineer working his way towards a PhD. Prior to this career, he served 12 years in the U.S. Army. He left the service with a post-traumatic stress diagnosis, something that we're going to talk about today. Beyond that, we have so much to talk to Tom about, so let's not wait any longer and bring him on to the Enduring Minds podcast. Hey, Tom, how are you doing?
What's going on? I'm pumped. We should get right to it. I'm fired up.
Well, let me say this. I don't know how many podcast shows I've hosted. It has never failed that this one makes me the most nervous. And my palms are sweaty, and I know Eminem songs are rattling in people's heads as I say that, but it's the reality. And I think it's because this is such an important topic for me that I want to make sure that we treat it with the respect that it deserves, and we treat you with the respect that you deserve. So with your blessings to jump right into it, I'm going to do just that. So I'm a New York kid, just like you. And I was doing some research, scanning the internet about information to bring to this conversation. And there's an article from 2018 in the Long Island Herald that described your family life as a kid as being difficult. And as a way to break away from that difficult life at the time, you were choosing between scouting, STEM, and the military. Why were those the 3 things that you were looking at? And if you don't mind giving us a little background on what was difficult and what you were hoping to get out of any one of those 3 choices.
That's well, first, that's some good digging from 2018. But yeah, definitely. I don't really do the origin story too much, but I like so many people in America, and especially so many people who join the military to like do something better in their lives. I came from a broken home. You know, my mom had me as a teenager. Single mom, oldest of 4, and like a latchkey kid from the 90s. I didn't have a stable guy around for a long time. I didn't really know how to do that kind of thing. I kind of joined Boy Scouts. That was something my mom got me into as a way to get me around other families and around other like male role models. So I kind of just bounced around from family to family. You know, there was nobody ever at home at my house, so I spent a lot of time at friends' houses, that kind of thing. And my mom having me at 17 was a real, like, I didn't know that was abnormal. My mom and I kind of grew up together. There were so many things that we learned to do, and I won't go through any crazy stories to embarrass her, but yeah. So we were both very young. Obviously, at the time, I was a little younger, but there was some growing pains, some things that she didn't know how to handle as a parent, and I didn't know how to deal with when it came to her like remarrying and her having relationship problems of her own. And those are things we never talked about. When I was growing up, my mom was always at work, so we didn't talk about things like money or relationships or even like food and diets and stuff. I didn't know that it was a struggle to put food on the table.
So how did those three choices then sort of help? How did they become the options for you in navigating away from those conversations that weren't happening? Was it something that you were seeking out so that you could have conversation and connection?
Yeah, actually, so my dad was not such a great dad. He had a lot of trouble on his own. He had to struggle with drug abuse and stuff like that. I used to spend a lot of weekends alone waiting for him when he didn't show up after whatever he had to deal with on his own. So early on in my teen years, I decided I wanted to be my dad to be the anti role model. I wanted to do like everything that he didn't do. I just it I didn't understand how much it hurt me at the time. I was very resentful of the fact that I was left out of stuff. And as I progressed, got through high school and made it out to the world, I realized that what I wanted really was something better than what I grew up with. What I wanted was I wanted to break the cycle. I didn't want to be, doing the same things my parents did. And when I realized that I was working in a resort town as a bartender in my early 20s, and I wanted something more and didn't know how to pay for it. I wanted to go back to school, and I started talking to friends, and everybody said, "You'd be really good at this army thing. Why don't you just join the military?" And I started looking into it for briefly. Then I talked to a recruiter, and then everything just kind of snowballed.
So moving into the military and making that choice from the list that you had, did you know moving into it what you were getting yourself into? Or did you go in just blindly, just going like, this is what I'm doing?
Yeah, no, it was pretty blind. Yeah, I had my grandmother told me, oh God, please don't do it. Bad experiences in the family. I think my uncle had tried to join the Marines and didn't work out for him. Yeah, no, not any clue really what I was getting myself into. I showed up to Fort McClellan, Alabama in 1999. Drank the Kool-Aid the first week and never looked back. I loved it. Everybody was right. It was probably one of the best decisions of my life. It eventually paid for school and did all the things I wanted to, but obviously I got sidetracked. I happened to join the military just before cranes splashed into buildings, so I got sidetracked for a little while, but I did eventually go back to school and yeah, no, to start with, I had no clue what I was getting into.
What was it about the military that you loved in the very beginning in comparison to what you were leaving, right? The non-communication with the family, the anti-role model. What parts of the military were the things that you latched onto that made you love it so much the way you just explained that?
That is such a good question. I just it was one of those places where I excelled at everything, and it was one of the first places also where not only could I excel at like anything I tried to do, um, it was one of the first places I found competition. Like I was really fast in high school. I was one of the fastest kids on the soccer team. Um, but like high school is a very small group for most of us. When you join the military and all of a sudden you're surrounded by thousands of other people and they're athletes also, it gets to be very, very competitive, and you can get very humbled very quickly. But the competition was amazing, and the fact that there was a team atmosphere about it. It was just like being part of a sports team, to be honest, and the opportunities to better myself. I took advantage of everything I could in those aspects, especially early on. it was just a different atmosphere than, like struggling paycheck to paycheck, wondering what I'm going to be doing in another year, that kind of thing. It provided that longer term structure, I guess, in the same atmosphere of like you're part of this thing, you're part of this something bigger than you.
I'm going to put words into your mouth and let you disagree with me or agree with me. Was being in that environment kind of like having the family you didn't have outside of the environment?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my ex-wife, we got married in the military. We were both dual service members. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head for sure.
And now that you have this family, were you able to build trust for yourself? Like, I trust myself to do things because now there are more conversations being had around a whole host of things that you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you weren't having with your mother, whether it was, food or money and finances, relationships. Could you feel like a trust in yourself building with the other members of the service that you were at the bases with?
I think it's such a weird trust is a very difficult thing to frame in that aspect. Obviously, there was a tremendous amount of trust. I trusted people with my life multiple times, but at the same time, a lot of the conversations that we have are like superficial. It's not very deep conversations. It's not like soul bearing stuff a lot of the time. It is. I mean, these people are still coworkers to an extent. So if you could imagine, I don't know, like your corporate softball game, hanging out with somebody there and having that level of trust with someone, that's how I felt, and that kind of sadly spilled over into my marriage. I think there was this superficial level of trust and this kind of I don't want to say like the military cultivates this culture of trust in respect to like you would trust somebody else with your life, but we don't go into those details like opening your soul kind of trust.
Yeah, Tom, I relate to a lot of the things you've already said. I just want to go back to the part where you're talking about breaking the cycle. And I relate so deeply to that in the sense of wanting something more than what you had, and that being the driving force without really knowing what you even really wanted. And I think that, going into something like the military and having those role models who are, in command that you may not have had when you talk about your father and him maybe not being around as much. And now you have these role models in these positions, and the military is very structured, it's very hierarchical. And how did you adapt to that level of, I guess, instruction, and seeing these people that you're obviously in the military and you're wanting to move through, I would imagine yourself to be like, I could be there someday. So how did you find yourself moving through the different ranks throughout the military as it went on?
Ooh, I dig that question. So I kind of latched on to any mentor I found. That's one thing that there's a plethora of in the military. You'll also often be given like a sponsor who's somebody who knows something a little bit more than you do about your unit or your job or that kind of thing. I loved all of those relationships. I didn't necessarily get along with all of those people or have see things eye to eye personally, but they were tremendous people. I always learned a lot from them. I still like if I would catch them today. There are dudes that right now I would love to sit down and chat just to ask them 50 questions. And I think it's very weird because the military is not known for having stable family lives. A lot of us are divorced. A lot of us are struggling with that stuff. A lot of us join the military to kind of like run away from those problems, like I mentioned earlier. And the military doesn't do a good job of teaching us how to, like break the cycle. We're there to do a job. And I think one thing I didn't realize was that a lot of these mentors were probably struggling with the same things I was struggling with, regarding like my personal relationships, that kind of thing, where we could grow professionally. We could have trust in ourselves and each other, that we could do our jobs. We could do our jobs together. But I think it was something that I wasn't aware of, as I was, looking up at some of these guys in awe, and girls too, but not realizing that they were also in this same structure, trying to get away from something, and not really learning how uh, um, to have that be a part of their lives, in a productive way. I did not learn very good personal relationships, boundaries. There were things that the Army should have like fed us, and didn't.
Yeah, your parallel between the military life and first responder life, me coming from 20 years as a dispatcher communications personnel, I feel that 100%. The people that I was most connected with were the people that were in my job, in my role, because you're with them all the time. Those became your friendships. And when you're in it with them, you can't see anything outside of it. If you don't have relationships beyond the job, and that's what I've really found over the years. It was like most of my friends are within first responder life because of the 4 on 4 off schedule, because of the weird shift work. And those people are always just going to agree with you because they're in it too. So I love that you touched on that piece, because it really mirrored exactly my experience within that first responder world.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a challenge too. Once you're there, my first unit, they said, welcome to the world's largest organized gang, and like every time your contract is up, that's the discussion, like, oh, you're going to leave us, you can't get out that easy. But yeah, no, it's definitely a, a different atmosphere for sure.
I'm going to tie the last question that you answered for Evan to the trust question. So you have mentors that you're looking up to, yet simultaneously you're talking about a superficial level of trust. What's that? I'm going to, how do you balance that? How do you figure out, like, I need to trust this person because they're going to help me move forward, but I also know that this is, surface level type trust. Like, I'm having a hard time balancing it myself, and I wasn't in the situation that you found yourself in. How did you manage that?
I didn't. I blame, like, upfront. I didn't even recognize it. It's something that I can acknowledge now, but at the time, I didn't. I thought that was the level of trust. That was like the level of trust in my family. That's what I left. That was what I showed up to the military with. I thought that was normal. And even in my marriage, like, I married, another service member. That was the level of trust we had with each other, and that was, um, what I like. That was what I thought was normal. It it didn't dawn on me that there was something better than that. And like I said, going away from my family, moving away, and joining the military as a way to break the cycle doesn't necessarily mean the Army is going to give me all the tools I need to break the cycle. It's just it's a means to sequester yourself away from whatever shenanigans were happening, that prevented you from that.
We'll talk about, what happened during the military, but I want to follow up that question with, once you are out of the military and you're, in civilian clothes, and you're dealing with a new group of people doing different things that probably is not as structured as it used to be in your life. How do you now come about to trust that person that you're now engaging in conversation, the person that you're working with, the teacher as you go through the PhD program? How do you learn to trust those people and get away from what you were just dealing with in the military?
That's that's probably the hardest thing, I think, for in my experience. I think that was extremely hard for me, but I had extenuating circumstances with the PTSD diagnosis. I don't know if we want to go into that later or not. I see that regularly with other people who leave the military, with other veterans, where we don't have that level of trust. It's kind of broken. There's this we'll call it the civil military divide, where a lot of people just don't understand us. We don't feel like we fit in anywhere else. And I think the military community struggles with this tremendously, is that we kind of like cling to that community after we left. And I think it's terrible. In my personal experience, it kept me from so many things. And when I moved to New York City to kind of like start over after realizing that I didn't really break the cycle, and having a divorce and a custody battle and all that miserable stuff, my goal when I got to New York City was to change that. My attitude was never say no, always go somewhere until my calendar is full. Was how I showed up to New York City, and that meant expanding my circle beyond veterans. And it's very awkward. I learned this in therapy, that people with PTSD will sometimes gravitate to not sharing anything, clamming up, being cut off, being distant, or oversharing when you feel that connection with someone, and overwhelming them with information because you finally feel like you belong to something, or have that level of trust with someone else. So it's very hard to balance it all. And I, by default, I just kind of go to the, like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't trust you. I don't know you kind of mentality. So that's something I, even today, like sending an email to my advisor, like, how much do I really want to put in this email?
The overthinking brain kicks in every time.
Yeah, right.
What you may not know about me, Tom, is I went through PTSD, depression, anxiety myself. So I do want to touch on that first, and then maybe we'll cycle back to the story of how it began, and kind of give people a little bit of a view of like what PTSD and those things do in your day-to-day life, and then we can kind of go backwards. I know Jason has a few questions that he would love to ask as well too, about the kind of the origin of it. I'm definitely focused on the PTSD aspect because I've seen a lot of post-traumatic growth myself once I removed myself from that situation, because I'm a firm believer that you can't heal in the place that broke you. And being able to move through it in your own way, in your own time, is like very empowering. Obviously, PTSD isn't just one incident. It's not one item. It's not one thing that happens in your life. It's an accumulation of multiple things that occurred dating back to your childhood, even, that probably led you towards a military career, that you were more susceptible to maybe being diagnosed with these things and having these things happen to you. But really, I just want to understand for you, like, what was it like hearing that diagnosis for the first time, and like what was going through your mind? What were you feeling? Because we talk a lot about thoughts, but like, what were you feeling when you were first told, Tom, you have PTSD?
Excellent question. First, I still hate it. Like, it drives me bananas. I hate having, it's like the biggest chip on my shoulder is this label that I'm disabled, or somehow unable to do things that other people normally do. I think when I first heard the words, it was very very mixed. First of all, I think honestly back then there was a lot of dissociation. So there was just the numbness that comes with that, and the, like, like, it just kind of like in one ear out the other ear, to an extent. Kind of like bitter that I was gonna have to go with this label moving forward. And that led to school. That led to me like chasing hard degrees and things, because I wanted to prove that was not the case, that I could still do things. And we can talk about that with the more of the origin of PTSD. But yeah, no, I did not like it, and I was not a fan. But I think at the time I still had a lot of work to do before I could come to terms with what that meant, and actually have like a real feeling about it.
So we'll rewind for a moment to get into the origin story of it. And so your entrance into the military, within a couple of years of being in the reserves, 9/11 happens, and you are now heading overseas to Iraq. And at the start of this conversation, you mentioned drinking the Kool-Aid of joining the military. And now you are off to war. Walk us through the thought process of, holy shit, this is happening, and we're heading to Iraq. What's that like for you?
It's really hard to put into words. I'm not gonna do it justice right now, but just from my own perspective, it was very surreal to sit on the border of another country and wait to invade it. We made a lot of comparisons, my team and I, to what veterans in World War II did before D-Day, before having to go into Europe. All of that training. I spent a lot of time at Fort Bragg, prior to these deployments, making sure I knew how to fire weapons, making sure I knew how to move around on a battlefield, making sure I knew how to communicate with people, all of the soldierly basic kind of stuff. And it was just, none of that ever prepares you for what is about to happen. There was a lot of nerves. There was a lot of, I need to be prepared for everything. The classic Anchorman, the head on a swivel. This is going to escalate very quickly, and most times it did, and it usually went sideways. Plans never survive first contact, all that kind of stuff. So it was honestly just the wildest experience. I think in preparation, I over prepared. There were a lot of nights where I would stay up at night reading manuals, making sure I knew how to use every piece of equipment, from radios to GPS device, everything that I might come across on a battlefield. I felt like I didn't know how to use it, and I didn't know how to use it better than everybody else. That lives were on the line, and we were supposed to be going to Afghanistan. This very, very early in 2002-ish, 3-ish, or the end of 2002. 2002. We were supposed to go help the first people who got there, and I guess shenanigans happened, and other people wanted to invade other countries, and the oil and weapons of mass, all of that nonsense aside, it's just, I don't think people realize what kids on the ground were going through. I was a couple of years older than most of the 18-year-olds that were, just signing up, wanting to go defend their country. So it's just very surreal to go and do that for the first time, in decades. It still, it feels like a different person. It's almost like a movie. When I think about it, I've recently run into some of those guys in DC advocating for legislation and things, and we were just like, what were we doing? How do we get through that?
Thank you for sharing that. I want quick follow up to that, because one of the things you mentioned early on in the conversation was communication. And now you have communication coming at you that you talked about in being prepared to, being on the border to enter into another country. And I'm going to tie this back to trust, right? So communication, non-existent early in life, over communicating as you get into the military, trusting what people are saying. Like, as a civilian who's never been in a situation, I have a hard time juggling all of these concepts in my own brain. How hard is it for you when you know for a fact that you have to make a split-second decision, or somebody may get hurt or potentially die, where over communicating, trusting, like all of these things are just bouncing around all over the place? This is not like working in an Excel spreadsheet in corporate America, E equals N+1 and N equals 5. Like, okay, I screwed that up. Nothing's really going to happen there. So if you don't mind giving me some insight and giving the audience some insight into how all of this stuff is balancing in your own mind as you're stepping foot on the battlefield.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to put on my old staff sergeant hat, and as a military leader, I would say that there are two aspects to this. One is that look at it like a team, like a sports team. People in the military train. Excuse me. We train on tasks over and over again, just like a sports play. If you are playing hockey and you know you're gonna use this person or that person on the end, you're gonna whatever the case may be. You have plans. Football, you know, you want the tight end open. You need to do something to distract the defender. Those type of tactics and plays, and I'm going to stick with the word tactics, are things that you beat into your head until you do them, until like it's reflexive. You don't have to think about it. Those are the things that yeah, exactly. Memory. It's just muscle memory. We don't worry about that kind of thing. We just assume that our bodies will overcome the fear, the fight or flight, and to the point that it will be fight, not flight. And then there's the technical part. The being tactically and technically proficient might be something you might hear from a military leader. The technical part was something that you know, you got to read. You can't just be a knucklehead and hope that things will work when stuff goes down. That also requires the same muscle memory. You just have to, if it's operating a radio, you have to read the manual, you have to understand it, you have to do it until you can also do that without thinking. So a lot of that is, you're not thinking about how you're doing those things. You're thinking more about the moments between, like, how do I wash my butt? All right. Like we're in the desert for months. How do you wash your butt? How do you cut your hair? All of that's those are the challenges in day-to-day life when you're in the middle of nowhere and you're going to be there for a long time.
Yeah, those are the things that anybody who's not in the military can probably just relate to in general, right? So being able to take care of yourself as a human, which is I'm sure much harder when you're that many months in. I want to touch on the fight or flight piece. So I'd imagine in your line of work that fight or flight is switched on 24/7. That was your default setting. And many people may not be able to understand that. I mean, me being from the first responder community, no different when I answered the phone. If I wasn't on, I could have lost a life. In your situation, like, you could have lost your own life or one of your members of your team that are with you. So how did you find coming back to kind of civilian life and figuring out, like, what is this baseline of, like, not being in fight or flight all the time? Like, how did you cope with that switch between, I guess, coming back from the military life into that day-to-day life, obviously going through the therapy and everything that you did with the post-traumatic stress diagnosis? How do you reckon with yourself of, like, I don't have to be that person anymore? Those skills are great, but I don't need that level of fight or flight in my day-to-day. Like, how do you reckon with that?
That was probably always the greatest challenge. I think I still struggle with that now. It's something that I'm aware of, and I think it's super important to be aware of it. That sometimes it doesn't go away. It doesn't ever like completely subside. I think that's the challenge with post-traumatic stress, is that there's some kind of changes inside. You know, whether it's up here in the brain, down here in the cardiovascular system, the things that you feel. But there are biochemical changes, and that's why, you know, part of the treatment is drugs and SSRIs to kind of like dampen that to a bit, so you can do the therapy and do the work. I think I will give you one very good example. Before I ever thought that I had PTSD, I came back from my first deployment, and my ex-wife and we were on the couch watching TV, and I couldn't sit there with her on the couch. There was just this overwhelming feeling of panic, and I didn't know how to explain it to her. I didn't know what was going on myself. I didn't understand it was the fight or flight like response that was just always on, and I was trying to sit on the couch and relax, and it erupted into a huge fight because I couldn't be close to her. I felt like I was, like I had to be able to jump up in case somebody broke into our house, like through the front door. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing. That's like so far out of the realm of possibilities but my little pea brain was just convinced that you are on the ready right now, like the 24/7. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. It wasn't an option. It wasn't something I chose. Like I could feel it inside. I just something bad was going to happen, and I need to be able to react, and that would keep me up at night. That would keep me from being close to people, and it's even today. Like I wear headphones because my startle response is so exaggerated. That when I'm here traveling in New York City, I will wear earbuds, not because I don't want to talk to people. Well, but it is partially because I don't want to talk to people, but also like the noises are so loud that I'm just constantly, startled. So the headphones kind of keep me looking normal to people.
Yeah, and I think for people that don't fully understand, I mean, PTSD has so many different variances from complex PTSD to like there's so many different angles that people can experience it, and everybody's trauma is their own, and nobody's trauma is less than somebody else's, even if it was military versus first responder versus somebody who had a child pass away, whatever it is. Like your trauma is valid, and I'm not sure if you've read any of Gabor Mate's work. Have you read any of his books? So the way he describes PTSD isn't something that happens to us. It's something that happens inside of us. And that's really for the listeners listening in, like that is truly what PTSD is. It's not the actual events and things that happen to us. It's what we made those things mean inside of our bodies and how we now have these reactions, like you said, startle reflex, needing to wear headphones. So I just want to make sure listeners kind of understand it from that angle, that it's not, like you said, it's not something I chose. It's something that's literally just happening inside of me that I need to figure out, like, how do I control this?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And that is, I just, I can't say this enough. It's not just combat. There are specific criteria for PTSD to fear for one's life. That could take any. You could be in a tornado. You could domestic violence. There's so many things. It just happens that the military community experiences those things maybe at a higher rate than everybody else, but it does not like negate anybody else's experience. And I that's the one thing that really bugs me, is that people kind of conflate this idea that PTSD it only happens to the military, or vice versa. That's just absolutely not true. Trauma is everywhere, and you don't have to be wearing a uniform to experience it.
When you leave and you enter into civilian life, was it immediate in which you became an advocate for soldiers like yourself, or was that something that took a little bit of time before you picked up the advocacy flag to try to get help for other members of the military the way that you were seeking help?
Um, Definitely not at first. No, this was actually a conversation I had with my doctor. So I went to the VA and had a couple years of therapy. And as I was wrapping up therapy, we were talking about like, what do I do? What do I go on to do? And my doctor suggested, was like, hey, there's a program at the VA. They're looking for veterans who've done all the work, and they're at a place where they're ready to talk about it more publicly and help other people do this. And that was for the first time that I thought about it. And then a couple of years, it's terrifying, to be honest. It's to kind of like put yourself out there for everybody to critique. But uh, I kind of dipped my toes into it in 2019. I joined a VA program called Make the Connection, and that kind of made me feel uncomfortable. And then I had some family issues also, so I kind of pulled back from that. And I've done this cycle over the years where I do a little bit more, and then I step back, and then I do a little bit more, and then I step back, because it's hard. And I've seen a lot of other veterans say the same thing. Sometimes that spotlight just is a little too bright for you to deal with while you're dealing with your actual like issues. So I was not a fan of doing the advocacy at first, but a lot of people have encouraged me and told me, you know, how much my story means to them. So I just don't want to see anybody do the same things I went through.
You were just answering Evan's question about fight or flight, and what I'm hearing is when the light got a little bit bright, you retreated a little bit, but then you came back to the fight. How hard is it to not just put yourself out there, because that's difficult for just about anybody, but having been trained to be in fight mode all the time, like you just described, to pull back and say, I need to take care of myself before I take the next two steps? Like, how hard is it for you to do that?
I think that's hard for everybody. Well, it was definitely hard for me. That when I finished therapy at the VA, that was one of my biggest questions. Like, I'm going to go away. I'm not going to have this like safety net here. What happens if I fall apart again? How will I know? And I've gone back to therapy several times afterward, and I'm surprised at how well I do at picking up. Like, I don't feel right. This is way too stressful for me. Maybe I should slow down. Those are the conversations that I have with myself that really kind of bug me, because I know that the self-care is a thing that I need and the thing that we all need. But you know, like I guess it's the balance. It's like how much of this is a stressor that should be normal, and how much of this is like where's the line? Where do I say I need help, kind of thing, and where do I just need to take a step back, relax, and you know, like let things cool off.
I want to touch on your kind of post-traumatic growth, because you talked about wanting to prove to yourself that you were capable. And really, you know, the quote that comes to mind for me, Jason knows I love quotes, so is "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become," which is a Carl Jung quote. And that, when I just in your conversations and everything you've been saying, that's what I feel like post-traumatic growth is like, I get to choose now the direction that I go. I'm still always going to be somebody who wants to be of service to others, but I need to be of service to myself first and foremost so that I can be of service to others. So really, I just want to hear from your perspective, like how, like if you were to like be asking yourself these questions, like how proud of you are you of yourself for like how far you've come from that PTSD diagnosis of sitting in that chair saying, Tom, you have PTSD, to now moving towards your PhD and proving that you are so much more capable than you probably thought you were at that moment that you were told that diagnosis?
I don't know. The military did a really good job of like filling my head with all these things that I'm pride and honor and all that other stuff. I don't I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on that until I need to step back and have those conversations with myself, and then I will obviously think about, you know, like, well, what did I do in the past that was successful, and then I will start evaluate. Oh wow, I completely forgot you know, how much work I put into this already, and that those are usually the times that help me get through those rough patches. Um, but I think it's a weird conversation, because I look at other people and I'm like, I'm just doing what everybody else is doing, and it's hard for me to equate that to something, you know, like prideful uh, noteworthy of like expression. Like, look at me, I've done a good job. Everybody, please clap, kind of thing. I I don't know. It's a challenge, but I do want to, like we've been talking about, when you take the time to step back and you realize I need to assess what I've done, that's when you can kind of at least look back and say, wow, that was a lot of work. I don't know about proud about it, but it was a lot of work, and I've come a very far way.
Yeah, incredible. So we have a way that we like to end our shows with a segment called Stop, Start, Continue. And really, this part of the podcast is based on the Japanese tradition of misogi. Are you familiar with misogi at all? So, at its core, misogi is about transformation. It's about shedding old habits, beliefs, and ideas, and really embracing and letting in a new and more powerful version of yourself while letting go and surrendering in order to grow. So, really, that post traumatic growth piece that we're kind of talking about. And we're going to be inviting the Enduring Minds community to be a part of this in a bigger way. Jason and I are still figuring out how we want to angle this, because we feel so strongly that it's such a powerful thing, that we want others, not just those that are guests, to be a part of. So really, it's going to be 3 questions. So the first question is your stop question. If you had to choose one mental or emotional habit you want to leave behind this year, what would it be and why?
Ooh, a mental health habit that I would like to leave behind this year.
Yeah.
I think, good Lord, overthinking is the one thing that I
First
nobody
thing that comes
right?
to mind. That's the best way
Yeah.
to do it.
Stop overanalyzing everything. Just move on.
Love it. Yeah, simple, straightforward. Love it. Your start question: if you were to commit to a radical mental shift this year that would force you to grow in new ways, what would it be and why?
I would. This is something that I think about every year, and I I have this habit where I like to be involved in a lot of stuff. I like learning. I like making things. I like building things. And when I see people doing the stuff I like, I just jump in. I just dive in. Whether it's like my sister's putting a puzzle together, or my mom's putting a puzzle together at home, or uh, people in a lab are building cool devices, all of that stuff. I spread myself way too thin across all of these things that I do, and I really should uh, take a step back and not like cheer them on instead of trying to help them. And I think that would be the radical mind shift for me, is to be less hands-on and more appreciative of the fact that other people are doing their own thing, and I don't have to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's my phrase right now is, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no. And it's a matter of like, it has to be for you, that it's like, this is my thing that I want to do, which is, yeah, that's
I
awesome.
think that's my problem. So I've been known to bring the motivation everywhere. That was one of my high points in the military. Was I'm always jacked up. I'm ready to do stuff. So my answer to everything is hell yes. And when I see people doing stuff, it's like, oh hell yes, I want to be a part of that. Let's go. Let's do it. But there's only 24 hours in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before Evan gets on to the last one, that's exactly what I was thinking to myself, because you said stop overanalyzing and start doing, and then also peel back at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a hard balance right there.
Yeah. It's always either like full stop ahead, like I'm digging into this. It's going to happen. We're going to do this. It's going to be fun. And then the minute that stops, why did it stop? What's going on? How do I handle this? It's all or nothing, and it's terrible. I hate it.
Yeah, there's only so much of you to go around. That's the fact, unfortunately. All right, final question, your continue question. If you had to symbolically cleanse or renew one aspect of your mental health in the next year, what would it be and why?
I put a lot of effort into physical stress relief, the gym, running, pool, all of that stuff. And this year, I've just been struggling with the motivation to get into the gym, to go out for a run. I think all those things are honestly like very important to me. I think I'm getting older now. In here. Part of that overthinking is like at some point I have to find new physical fitness hobbies, things to de-stress. And I think I would like to continue that. And it's just the struggle with motivation right now to find myself in the gym, or out on, in the park, or any of those things. I would like to continue doing that.
Yeah, the line that I like to always use is, you will never always have motivation, but if you can find that consistency and the discipline in it, and I'm sure from military life, I'm probably speaking words that you've probably heard 1,000 times, but that's one thing that I found for me personally is that motivation can be fleeting, but the consistency and the discipline is what will guide you towards the things you want to do.
The hardest part is starting. That's what I stick with. Anything I can do to make myself start is that's going to happen.
Yeah, for me, running has been somewhat inconsistent this year, but the one thing I started doing was 40 push-ups and 100 bicycle crunches a day, and just getting it done, right? And that little bit has gone every single day. And then I've seen the changes in my body. And then that has gotten me motivated to say, let's go run now too, even when the running doesn't feel good.
I saw this. I think I scrolled by this, and I think I stopped scrolling and went to the gym when I saw this. I was like, oh yes, that's my motivation right there.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for coming on the Enduring Minds podcast and sharing your vulnerability and pieces of your story with us today. Do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, or a story that you want to leave us with?
I think so. The one thing I was thinking about, and first of all, I'm immensely happy that you're taking this on. I think it's such a needed conversation in so many aspects of society today. And in the back of my head, the one thing that I really wanted to kind of like nail home was this idea of a patriarchal society where I don't think we talk enough about. I guess in the military we call it alpha male. If you're a feminist, it's this patriarchal society. But this idea that men can't be broken, men have to have a role, men have to provide or do this thing. I think that was the hardest thing for me to get through in this transition to like I am the soldier who can't be hurt to this human being who needs to be fixed. I wish more people understood that you don't need a label. You just need to be yourself. I'm super happy that you're doing this. Anything I can do to help, always let me know. It drove me to, to try to hurt myself. I hate the fact that other people are going to do the same thing, because they're stuck in that same system, that same mentality, and it bothers me. That's one of the things that keeps me up at night, is knowing that somebody else is having that same struggle. Like, how do I put down this armor? How do I even understand what's happening? So the conversation is where you start.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that and for the support for our show. It's one of the things that Evan and I and Owen, when we started this conversation about this particular show, was we have to have the conversation, and you don't know who's going to see it. Look, we just mentioned posting on Threads doing 40 push-ups, and you got motivated to go to the gym. So if somebody comes across this podcast and hears your story or Evan's story or my story and says, well, if that person can talk about this, then so can I. And they go and seek help from somewhere, or maybe they just turn to a significant other and start having a conversation, go back to that communication word. That is one of the driving forces behind this show. And I just realized, I think that's why I get so nervous when we do this show. It's not because I don't want to talk about it. It's because it's so important to talk about it. So thanks for sharing that stuff. So where can people connect with you and everything that you're doing out in the world? I know you have a handful of different projects going on. So give us the websites, give us where people can find you.
Oh gosh, I think my nonprofit is probably the most consistent thing in my life right now. WeLiftAndShift.org. My handle, I think, across social media everywhere is Smootosaurus, which is super obnoxious because I'm old and I'm a big dumb animal, just like the Tommy Boy movie. But yeah, so that's kind of where it came from. That was one of my nicknames in the military. But yeah, like if you can find me at those places, or find the Lift and Shift Foundation anywhere online, you'll probably figure out where I am.
Appreciate you. We'll put that into the show notes. Thank you for joining us, Tom. I want to thank the audience for joining us on Enduring Minds, episode 7. We are a proud part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. We're one of 9 incredible shows. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and now you can comment on Spotify on this show and our network, as it will continue to allow us to bring incredible guests like Tom Smoot and their captivating stories to the Enduring Minds community. Our next episode will feature Dex Douglas on April 10th. So until next time, let's continue going the distance and breaking the silence together.